Tonight on VERITAS, our special guest is Darcy Weir. For more than 10 years, Darcy has taken his camera into the places most people only read about. He has investigated UFOs flying over active volcanoes, secret space programs buried in classified archives, and mysterious sightings beneath the oceans that suggest we are being watched from more than just the skies. Through his documentaries, he has followed the trail of the men in black, those strange figures who appear after credible encounters to silence witnesses. He has looked into psychic experiments, once funded by intelligence agencies, searching for proof that the human mind may reach farther than science is willing to admit. He has also explored the legend of Sasquatch, speaking with researchers and witnesses who believe an undiscovered species still walks among us. His films have taken him into crop-covered fields where geometric patterns appear overnight, carved into the earth with precision that seems almost impossible. Each investigation adds another piece to a growing picture of secrecy and the unknown. Whether it's objects moving through our oceans, lights dancing above volcanoes, or ancient stories that refuse to fade, Darcy's work pushes us to ask what is real and who decides what the public is allowed to know. Tonight we'll talk about the evidence he's gathered, the witnesses he's met, and the forces that continue to hide the truth in plain sight. This is a conversation about what we see, what we believe, and what may finally prove that reality is far stranger than we think. Darcy Weir is coming up next. Welcome to VERITAS. If this is your first time listening, welcome home. To access tonight's full interview and all of our exclusive material, simply join the VERITAS Plus family by clicking on the subscribe button at veritas7.com. While you're there, don't forget to visit the VERITAS store, featuring a range of great products, including Focus Life Force Energy. Experience the benefits with a 15-day free trial of FLFE, no credit card required. Also, be sure to explore our enhanced VERITAS Plus transcripts, offering full transcripts, comprehensive analysis, and exclusive insights for every episode. As a VERITAS Plus member, you'll receive a 50% discount on these enhanced transcripts. Want to get in touch? Be a guest on the program? Suggest someone or share feedback? Just click the contact button at veritas7.com. So sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's program. His latest documentary film, actually his 20th original production, is titled The Psychic Phenomenon. His website is occultjourneys.com, and I'm delighted to have Darcy Weir back on VERITAS. Hello, Darcy, and welcome back.
Hey, Mel. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here again.
It's always a pleasure. I was just talking to you offline. I can't believe it's been so long that your first documentary film, Phil Schneider, The Life of Phil Schneider. I just want to discuss a little bit of that at the beginning of this program, because I'm still just reeling from those images you showed me about Phil. If anybody doesn't know who Phil was, you need to look at, just Google, go to YouTube. I don't know if those videos still exist out there, but can you take just a couple of minutes about Phil's life? I was in communication with his daughter and his ex-wife, but nothing materialized. I'm not sure if those ladies are still in touch with the government, where they're told do not talk to the media. Tell us a little bit about that documentary, since it was your first one.
Yeah, I started basically researching it and interviewing people as far back as 2009. After a few years passed, I published it in 2012 when the world was supposed to end. And that just originally went out on YouTube. I remade it. It's now on like Amazon and a lot of other streaming sites. But essentially, I wanted to speak to people that knew Phil Schneider while he was alive. So I spoke to his late ex-wife, my friend who collaborated with me on that, Lee. He actually traveled out to their home in the Oregon area, and they interviewed. He interviewed Cynthia's daughter, Rosemary, and then we also had interviews with Richard Sauder, Richard Dolan. It was my very first interview with Richard Dolan, and I've worked with him quite a bit over the past 2 decades. And we put together the story based on, what's credible out there about underground bases, Phil's testimony and what happened to him, and then his death and how it seemed somewhat mysterious, especially with like crime scene photos and the autopsy, the Clackamas County investigation into the catheter cord being wrapped around his neck, and just all kinds of strange things that weren't sort of adding up. And then the newspaper published that he died of natural causes, and the autopsy confirmed he died of asphyxiation. So it was just a lot of strange sort of things that did not seem to be very credible.
You spent years interviewing all these insiders, witnesses, scientists. When you look at all of it together, what's the one piece of evidence that still keeps you up at night?
I think what keeps me up at night is that the system in which we have this discourse about UFOs or, some kind of technology that's suppressed from the public, or a non-human intelligence that's greater than mankind, possibly interfacing with us. The mainstream media, the scientific community, and that includes like the institutions that the scientific community is run by, like NASA or academic university and college systems. All of that together creates our reality, and our reality says that these things do not exist. Now, these days, obviously, the conversation is shifting towards, yes, UFOs, UAPs are real, but we still don't know exactly what they are. And if they're, some kind of secret tech we're operating, if it's a non-human intelligence operating it, their point of origin, that type of thing. The conversation is still alive. I think that it has even wider and more mass appeal these days, but the questions are still not answered completely.
Did you look into all these orbs at the beginning of the year, the ones in the East Coast, New Jersey, New York, and we even saw some of them here in Arizona, and now they're appearing in Europe? Have you looked into that at all?
Yeah, the drones, I've been looking at that, and I mean, I just wonder if we're at the precipice of some kind of Orwellian future where secret drone technology is flying over our cities, flying over our air bases and security installations all around North America, to test, the capabilities, or to spook the public into thinking there's some kind of, greater narrative of fear to follow on. So I just worry about that being the main task of the sort of drone phenomenon. They still don't seem to look like UFOs, right? They don't look like a disc or a triangle or a pyramid or a tic tac or something. I think if they looked like that from the outset, we would be a bit more concerned about the possibilities of this being a non-human intelligence incursion. They still look like little aircraft, or they look like something that's human tech, right? So that has me convinced that it's just something that's not acknowledged, that's possibly from an adversary, and that has its own problems, or something that's being test flown by a super top secret, like division of the military or something like that, and they're not allowed to disclose what's going on. I know that may be super controversial, but it's a possibility too.
I think there's obviously, ever since I interviewed Milton Torres, the man who in the 1950s in East Anglia was ordered to shoot down a UFO the size of an aircraft carrier, and he told me 50 years is the technology that they have that the public doesn't have. And this is way before AI. I mean, technology, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it used to double every 18 months. Now it doubles every month. And this is why, I don't know, and this is a parenthesis of what we're discussing, but it just occurred to me to discuss it with you too, because this is relevant. I don't know if where you are, you've seen the electric bills going up, but everybody's seen that. Not only electricity, but water as well. And people think, oh, it's inflation. Well, think about all the data centers that are opening up everywhere, billions of dollars being invested into this. Right now, I believe it's 5% of the water and electricity consumption that these places have. If technology is doubling every month, in 5 years, it will be about 56% consumption. So if these things, these computers, are becoming somewhat sentient, if they start saying, wait a second, it's either going to be us or humanity. This is a concern I have with all this technology, and why I think, like you, a lot of these drones, perhaps they're not ours, maybe a different type of government on top of the government, but there were also some other orbs, because somebody sent me footage, and it's public, of one of these drones that you can see the red and the green light approaching it, and then all of a sudden, boom, this drone just fell from the sky next to the other. So
Yeah, I've seen that.
So what is the other one? Not the one that fell. What is the other one?
Well, if the attention on the skies around New Jersey is at an all-time high because of the drone, the sort of human-looking drone activity, of course, you're going to have cameras and eyes aiming at the sky at the time that there's probably going to be genuine UFO activity. So I think that video that you're discussing was one of these cases where you literally have the drone activity, and it just so happens that at the same time they capture a authentic like UFO orb in the same area. And I've said that before. It's like people's attention is going to capture real UFO activity at the same time. And that's what was happening at that time.
This is another area that interests me. You've been to Mexico City, Popocatépetl, the volcano, Ixtalhuihuatl, the other one. So many, there's live cameras. In almost every night, you can see these lights going in and out of these volcanoes. Why are volcanoes such consistent UFO hotspots, especially in Latin America?
Well, I think Popocatépetl, for example, has a lot of attention because it's an active, possible threat to the surrounding areas like Puebla and Mexico City itself, which millions and millions of people live around there. If that thing goes cataclysmic, people talk about the Yellowstone volcano all the time. If that has a massive eruption, it could disrupt all kinds of things across the United States. Same thing goes for Popocatépetl. So the government has these cameras trained on them 24/7, 365 days a year. And at night, it records in FLIR, basically, and in the day, natural color footage. I think that's where you will get, with that much data, some UFO hunters are going to look through that footage, which is also published for free on YouTube. Excuse me. there's a live stream that people can tune into and watch Popo any time of the day or night. I think some of that UFO activity is definitely misinterpreted and is possibly terrestrial craft. Like there is an airport behind Popocatépetl, and I actually show the map in that volcanic UFOs documentary I did with Jaime, where you can see where the airport is on the other side of the volcano from a bird's eye view. So when you're looking at the night vision camera, you might be seeing a plane in the distance with its lights on, the headlights or so on, that would be picked up by that kind of camera. And it would look as if it's landing inside the crater or going in towards the crater from that vantage point. But there are other videos that still seem to be credible where you really do see something seem to go into or come out of the crater. And some of the footage is from daytime. So what's going on with that? Then you also have the Colima fiery volcano in the west of Mexico, which has had strange UFO sightings and a pretty famous daytime recording by news journalists that were watching it go active and erupt. And this strange sort of disc-shaped, like cylindrical object slowly goes through the ash cloud and then off into the sky. I don't think there's anything we have that would be, an aircraft that's terrestrially made that could fly through the ash cloud of an active volcano and survive.
One of the most impressive videos I've seen lately, and I'm sure you saw it, this is from April 15th of this year over Mexico City, a city with close to 23 million people. When you see that video, it's a meteor, and it's heading straight down to the ground. And you see this little light close by. The moment that light appears, that meteor changes direction, and it goes up and straight again, almost as if it saved millions of people. What's your take on that video?
I've seen that. I mean, it's interesting. It looks anomalous, right? I just don't know how that was recorded and what the source, who the true source of that video is, right? I've seen another video that looks pretty compelling where an asteroid looks like it gets shot out of the sky by another object.
Yep.
Seems real, but I mean, with AI and the ability to create animations so easily these days, I just worry about the authenticity or credibility of some of these videos, especially if they've gone viral and we don't really know the true source yet.
And I'm glad you're keeping the skeptical, open-minded skeptic, because that's very important, especially these days where it's becoming almost indistinguishable from what is reality. Some of these videos are so realistic that you can't tell. But I remember years ago, maybe 10 years ago, before AI came along to the masses, and I saw these videos coming from Russia, Ukraine, with these lights coming out of the sky, and then the people filming, all of a sudden the glasses shatter in their houses, and you could see the cars have their windows blown up and all the alarms. That to me was not AI. So even one of those videos shows one of the lights being deviated as well. Does it make you wonder if there's really something out there that protects us from all of these, all this debris around?
Well, you mentioned that the military is possibly 50 years ahead of us in terms of technology.
Back then, maybe now it's even more.
Yeah, especially with the advent of AI. And they probably had AI working for them before we did. But, you look at Ben Rich's comment, the former CEO or president of Skunk Works, who said to Jim Goodall on his deathbed, we have UFOs, which he underlined could be considered unfunded opportunities, meaning we didn't build them, they were just given to us or we found them. And he mentioned that we have the technology to take ET home, that we are 50 years ahead of anything that's out there in the military publicly, right? So maybe there is a system out there that is protecting the planet that we don't even know about, which includes things that look like UFOs, but are military assets, right? That are flying around our oceans or flying around space outside of the Earth's, outside of the atmosphere, that are trying to ward off threats. I don't think that's impossible.
I remember my conversation with Edgar Mitchell, somebody who is very apparent in your documentaries. And he told me, my grandparents came from the East, horse and buggy, to New Mexico. And in 60 years, he said, and in just 60 years, I went to the moon. So the technological explosion that happened from that point to now almost makes you feel, really, was it us who developed all this technology? That to me lends credence to the work or the testimony rather of Colonel Philip J. Corso, who said, all these fiber optics and all this technology that we gave the AT&Ts of the world with the condition that you say you came up with it. We'll give it to you, but you came up with it for society's, sake. Do you think that is true? Or humanity actually evolved to the point that we created all these computer chips, fiber optics, and the rest of it?
Yeah, with Philip J. Corso's book, The Day After Roswell, it's obvious his perspective is that we inherited a lot of this technology and then refined it, and it went out to a lot of military installations and Wright-Patterson Air Force applied materials and such, and was reverse engineered by companies like Rand or Westinghouse or back then Belcom, I think, that the types of companies that actually eventually helped get us to the moon with the astronauts like Edgar Mitchell. I don't discount that. It's really hard to prove it. I do think human ingenuity is important to not discount, though, and that we have to keep in mind that, we were able to develop all kinds of stuff on our own before the advent of the computer, the microchip, and so on and so forth. So it may be something that we were going to eventually come across in our own discovery in science, but we came across it earlier and started working on it earlier because of the circumstances, like recovering a crashed non-human craft and reverse engineering what they had, Totally. I could believe it. I actually have a friend who is a Hollywood director and really wants to retell the Roswell story from sort of the Philip J. Corso perspective. And I think it needs to be told.
Absolutely. And these are stories from people almost deathbed. I mean, he was later in his life doing all of this. But speaking of Jaime Maussan, Jaime, that was the only time, if any interview, where we lost electricity in the studio completely. And we waited for 2 hours, nothing. And when I told them, well, we had to reschedule then, I went outside and there was a white van from the electric company. And I asked my neighbors, they all had electricity but me. And the guy didn't want to tell me anything. Oh, just doing routine work, and then he left. But we did it again, because a lot of people think that we do live interviews, and we don't for that specific reason. But in your film, Volcanic UFO Spots, again, do you think that these craft are monitoring the planet or simply using our atmosphere as a pathway? Because they go in and out of these, not only volcanoes, but mountains like Mount Adams and what's the one in California, the very famous one?
Mount Shasta.
Mount Shasta, yes.
Yeah, I think it's possible. And we have all kinds of sightings around volcanoes, so it should be something we look into more.
There's a pattern in your films, the sky, the ocean, the mind. Do you think these are separate mysteries or part of one larger system of contact?
Well, I think, if you look at the different domains, right, which organizations like ARROW, the All Domain Resolution, what is it, organization or something? I can't remember the
I know what you're talking about.
But they're supposed to be, when they say all domain, they're talking about outer space, the sky, and then the oceans. And I think obviously even land, mountains, volcanoes, anything from the 3D world that we live in. And they're supposed to resolve anomalies and UAP incursions or UFO sightings and that type of thing. So I wouldn't give them a ton of credibility because as of lately, I think it's pretty well covered that they've just ended up being a catch-all sort of research group like Project Blue Book to debunk and stop the conversation in terms of the anomalous perspective. But it's interesting that they're supposed to be engaging in all those domains. That's where we live. We live in all domains. We're a 3D, we're an organism that's meant to capitalize in 3D, 3 dimensions. And then the mind, I think, is a really strange thing that science is not, there's lots of research being done, but we haven't pinpointed exactly how the mind works. And there's all kinds of mystics and paranormal researchers and even quantum scientists that are now saying that the mind is, obviously connected to the brain, which is a 3D technology that all organisms sort of have that are living on this planet. Humans seem to have the most developed version of it. And with the psychic phenomenon, this recent documentary, I'm kind of exploring the idea that there is a non-local information source and a realm in which our brains can connect to, where non-human intelligence interact and the psychic ability can flourish. And so I think that also leads back to the idea of quantum, like this area of science that we haven't fully explored yet, that we're just kind of scratching the surface on right now and trying to navigate. Perhaps people have proposed this idea, and back like 3 years ago when I first started making this, I was at a presentation that Tracy Garbett Dolan was putting on, Richard Dolan's wife.
Yep.
And she was presenting on the idea that the brain, the human mind, is part of this maybe quantum computer room temp sort of machine. And I like that idea. And I like the idea that we are operating in 3D, but our minds may not stay there.
Yeah, I'm coming not to the conclusion, but to the thought that maybe we're somewhat like avatars. And there's so many variables to this equation, even with, say, an organ transplant. I know people who have received an organ transplant from somebody else. Say an older man received a heart. This is somebody I knew. He passed away, but he received a heart from a 22-year-old who got into a car accident. All of a sudden, he started developing certain tastes of food and music. This is a man who only loved country music and loved German food, and all of a sudden he developed this taste for, believe it or not, he was in his 60s, rap, hot food, Mexican food, and he contacted the parents of the donor, and they said, yeah, our son loved all that. So it's proven that there's cellular memory in every cell of our bodies. And then you're talking about remote viewing, I had the pleasure of interviewing Ed Dames, Russell Targ, Joe McMonagle, all these people that basically prove to you that the mind can actually get out and see beyond our spectrum. Because our spectrum, visual, audio, is so tiny. If you look at what animals can perceive, we're always told that you are the highest in the food chain. But every animal out there has more perception than we can actually perceive. Have you ever heard of decyanin? I always have a problem pronouncing this. Decyanin glasses, as in the movie They Live. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Air Force pilots were testing it out in the past few decades. I heard this
Vietnam.
Story that, and
Cliff High's parent, a dad.
Right. When they put them on, they were seeing what looked like flying brains in the sky around the jets and like demonic looking things. So they were interacting and then commenting over their radio channels about, possibly engaging these things. But if they took the glasses off, they couldn't see it in their visual spectrum. So I do believe that is like sort of this dimensional thing, and also the limitation of a human mind and our eyes, that we're just not allowed to visually see into the whole world that's around us.
I totally believe in what they call the archons, the jinn, the parasites that we can't see, but they're actually here. We are their food, and they survive on fear, on depression, and all of these things. And it makes you wonder, why is it that every time as a society we feel like, oh, finally we get a peaceful retreat, boom, there's a false flag, or there's another catastrophe that happens. They always want to keep us down all the time on purpose, because these beings probably have a lot of influence over those who are the so-called controllers.
I mean, that's a scary thought. It definitely, if you look at David Icke's work and stuff, it kind of feeds into that theory. It's possible, it's possible that the world is not just run on love and light. It's possible that we live in more of like a hellish reality than one may think. And perhaps that hellish reality, the real engine for it is all the chaos and the pain and the fear that is constantly amplified by the media and by worldwide catastrophes and human suffering.
This is why I tell everybody who's listening, disconnect yourself from the media. You won't get the truth. And you need to get out there and connect with the ground. Literally connect with the ground, the beach, the forest. But the Men in Black, that's something you also discuss, and I've been discussing for a long time. And going back to, again, I don't mean to continue picking on the late Milton Torres, but when he came back, when he couldn't shoot that UFO down because it disappeared, He landed and he went to debriefing with somebody who didn't look like military, but basically told him, if you want to lose your wings, you're going to open your mouth. Just keep your mouth shut if you want to continue flying. Don't tell anybody. So for 50 years, he couldn't even tell his parents when they died what he went through.
Mm-hmm.
But he described the person almost like a robotic, and so many people discuss the same thing. They seem pale. They seem very like how do you say it? Automatons, like robotic, and they act in a different way. Why wouldn't the military just send some of their upper brass to debrief people, and instead you get these men in black? They usually visit those who have been abducted or who have seen something they should not have seen.
Yeah, I think you have this sort of more paranormal Men in Black stories. Albert K. Bender, who had that initial UFO community, international UFO community that he was building in the 1950s. And then he took a hiatus. And later on, when he resurfaced, he said, I was approached by these like ghoulish, almost like spirit ethereal kind of Men in Black entities that just manifested in my home and told me, don't talk about the Antarctic, don't talk about UFOs and possible non-human intelligence over there or something. And I think the idea that information is suppressed from the public is the greatest sort of theme there. That's the thing that people should really pick up on. And it leads back to your other story about suppression by a non-human intelligence kind of maybe being at the top of the power structure. The archons and the jinn and all that type of thing could be just like a cultural view of describing some higher intelligence that is sort of manufacturing our reality. And we kind of discussed that actually in the Psychics documentary, because Ingo Swann, he proposed that is the case, that he thinks there's a higher intelligence that's sort of manufacturing what could be considered real to the masses in our reality. And one of the ways that they might be sort of governing our abilities, our discoveries, and keeping us within a box of manufactured reality is through things, control mechanisms like a Men in Black encounter. And I think the real Men in Black encounters are the 3-letter agencies that, depending on the type of witness that saw something highly anomalous, they send out somebody from a corresponding agency to intercept that person based on their ranking in society. So you have somebody like John Callahan, who's from the FAA, and they were trying to get to the bottom of this incredible UFO event that happened over Anchorage, Alaska, from JAL Airlines flight in the 1980s, right?
Yep.
And, just to describe that encounter, it was a massive, what they described almost looked like a sun in the sky that emanated, in the middle of the night, 2 smaller objects that sent green lights into the flight cabin, scanning the pilots and stuff. It was a transportation flight, so it wasn't like a ton of people sitting in chairs like a typical commercial flight. They were delivering stuff, but the pilots were completely spooked, and they were doing these massive evasive maneuvers in the sky, big circles, imagine with like something like a 747, to get away from these objects. And they later landed on solid ground and made their report to the FAA. John Callahan was brought in to investigate. And later that week, eventually the CIA called him and other people that were on that investigation into one room, and they were told never to discuss that case again. And all their files were confiscated because they were told to bring all their files on it by the CIA. So I think that is one of the control mechanisms of reality is the authorities, right? And they deem what is allowed to be discussed or what is allowed to be in the public. And UFOs and the non-human intelligence sort of side of things has really not been allowed for a long time.
Do you think that a lot of the cattle mutilation and re-abductions by not Men in Black, but military abductions, MILABs, is it because they find out somebody gets abducted, right? And instead of saying, yeah, extraterrestrial life happens and they're interacting with us, they actually send somebody dressed as an alien to re-abduct you, like what happened to Whitley Strieber and Melinda Leslie and many others. Do you think that's the modus operandi of the government to find out what happened?
Yeah. It also could muddy the waters and create confusion within the abductee as to which event was more real, right? And their memories may become more clouded in terms of what were there humans there? Were there, non-human intelligence there? Was it just humans? Like all that sort of thing would become called into question and make things less discernible. So, of course, yeah, my lab could operate as both a obstruction of the truth and a debriefing of what possibly happened and an examination physically of the person that was taken aboard as well. Somebody like Gary Nolan has discussed, Stanford University researcher and professor, that he was approached by the CIA at one point to examine blood and physical traumas as a result of UFO or non-human intelligence interactions by experiencers. And maybe the way that they organized or gathered some of that data were from my labs.
I forgot which event this was, but it was the first time that a case was taken to court of some people in their car who were abducted, or the craft was too close to them and they experienced radiation burning. And they actually had to
Cash Landrum.
I think Cash Landrum, exactly. I think it was Cash Landrum, where they actually, how do you report that to the police?
Oh, wait, is that Kecksburg?
Or Kecksburg, one of the two.
It might be.
So they had to go to court. And if you go to court, how do you present yourself? And if you had to file a claim to your insurance carrier, how would they deliberate? I would be so interested to see the fine print of that case, because this is the first time I've seen something that goes to court to say this is what happened to us and what happened to it. Do you ever follow that case?
Yeah, I didn't follow that case too closely, but I can think of a case that I did follow a little bit closely because I spoke to John Burroughs. This was a gentleman who was involved in the Rendlesham
Initial Force, yes,
incident.
of course.
Yeah. So the Bentwaters Air Force Base over in the UK, and then the forest just adjacent where multiple men encountered UFOs. And John was one of these people that went out one night and said he actually stepped into this sort of UFO and emanating light and had this kind of like download and all kinds of strange stuff happen to him. He was later examined and interviewed, and I believe it's alleged that Kit Green was on the base the day after his incident, who was CIA scientist at the time, and possibly was part of, let's call him a men in white coat, who was getting a debrief and doing a physical on-site examination of this experiencer that had proximity and physical, a reaction to the UFO. Another person you could sort of point to having that same sort of incident was Jim Pendleton, said that he actually touched the craft, right? Now, John, he has said that he was approached by people in the past 10 years to give testimony about his experience and his health effects as a result. So the detriment to his health as a result. And the interesting thing is that what people may not know is John McCain, U.S. Senator who was a Vietnam War vet and thought very passionately and fought for veterans that, come back from service or combat and seem to have been kind of left by the wayside and not taken care of by the system. He was a champion for John Burroughs. And when he found out, because it was reported to John McCain, I think by Hal Puthoff and those guys, that when he went to go make a claim to his heart condition at the time, he had a failing heart valve. The Air Force claimed that he never worked for them and that he didn't have the medical benefits to cover that claim. So John Burroughs showed pay stubs and all kinds of records that showed he definitely did work at the Bentwaters base at that time and had a long record with the Air Force. So he should have had those benefits. John McCain thought that was strange. And when he looked it up with the military, John Burroughs' files had been sort of classified and they couldn't instate his coverage because of that or his service. So John McCain ran it up the flagpole, got his records reinstated, but they were conditional. He had to sign apparently some kind of affidavit that if he was ever called in the future to discuss the detriment to his health as a result of UFO encounters, that he could have his records reinstated and also have his coverage of his health at that time. And that's what he had to do. So I think that's something that happens and is really unfortunate, especially for people, especially if we're talking about the Kecksburg incident. How do you file a healthcare claim when UFOs or something like that that's on the fringe of our reality is not even accepted to exist? And you're saying I got like nuclear radiation burns from some kind of UFO.
And that's the thing. That was reported in 6 states. And I would be so curious to know if police departments across the United States or Canada or the world have some kind of, what do you call it, the parameters that they follow. Because right now with technology, and I hate to say it, but AI is getting in the way of all of this reputable people, because you have the UFO reporting centers who are probably receiving a lot of AI stuff. And it was Richard Dolan who actually told me the first time I ever heard of this back in 2010, I think it was, look at all, because I used to show him images and he said, just watch it. Just go to Google Images and put them through. You're going to find out 99% of the time there's somebody else's. And somebody says, I just took that yesterday, and it's a picture from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So as researchers, what do you do to combat the disinformation, misinformation that's out there more prevalent than ever?
Ask for sources. I mean, any journalist is trying to ask for that, right? And as a citizen journalist, somebody's trying to understand the truth behind a picture or a video, ask for the original source. There's a Mars rover, I think AI generated landscape anomaly video that's been going around TikTok. I think like maybe Instagram, X, and TikTok. And it looks like the Mars rover is panning a landscape, and there's three what look like sort of columns that are coming out of the ground that look like they're very real.
You mean man-made or, not artificial?
They look artificial. They look artificial, and they look like they stand out like a sore thumb because the landscape is covered by rubble, like rocks and sand and normal debris you would expect on the Martian surface geologically. But then you have these like columns that are standing out, these like little monoliths. And I was asking for the source of that the moment the video was circulating. And it turns out, the Mars rover takes these landscape mosaic shots. So it takes like multiple pictures and it turns it into a panorama, just like our cameras can do panoramic pictures if you let it scan the landscape until it stitches together that big photo. Well, the Mars rover has been doing that for a long time. And somebody had taken one of these Mars rover dioramas, I guess you would call it, and they fed it into AI and said, make it look like the Mars rover, make it look like a video of a Mars rover panning the landscape and sees something anomalous coming out of the ground. And that's been posted all over social media as a real video, but it was just originally a diorama photo turned into a video. And you're going to see that more often than not now because anybody can create a spooky video on their phone with the advent of artificial intelligence and a creative mind.
It was Patrick Wood, the man behind technocracy.com, who told me the biggest problem we all face is that we are divorcing ourselves from reality. And that is so true. Every day I see these videos now of what looks to be like Ring cameras from people's Ring footage, and it looks 100% real, but you see what it is, and it's absurd, some of the things that are happening. Somebody's taking a nap, and a bear comes and licks his face, and believable. So what I used to say years ago, what's going to happen in a court of law when you have to introduce evidence? Are they going to believe the AI, or are they going to disbelieve the real footage that could, make somebody be innocent or guilty, however you want to look at it?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I've seen those night vision Ring cam videos that have gone viral of what it looks like a family of raccoons jumping on a trampoline at night.
Yes.
Or, a pig and a goose or something like that. It looks great. It looks real, but it's not. And,
See, but you and I can discern that. But how many people out there just totally believe it?
Well, I think there has to be like a technology that addresses that eventually, which is kind of like the Google Photos search that you were talking about before, where you can run an image through internet search and you can see, oh, okay, this image was uploaded 20 years ago and it was created by this person. There's metadata linked to that, right? I think if AI companies that are allowing this video content to be pumped out by them, like ChatGPT, OpenAI, what is it? Another one's
Midjourney, Claude,
Luma
Gemini,
Labs,
Grok.
Midjourney. Yeah, all of them. Grok, ML, Runway ML. They should allow that these videos be searched through their databases to back check if they were created in their database, kind of like Google allows you to scrape the internet to see if an image, what the origin of an image is. I think all these AI companies, if they're scraping the World Wide Web to create images and videos out of their artificial intelligence technology, they should also allow people to have access to their databases to see if the videos or images were created from their source.
See, a lot of people don't believe that these machines are, they say, no, they cannot become sentient because they're not human. But what if they're fed information that they believe themselves? For example, I know so many stories of AI now. When you say, thank you, you were great, that specific AI starts becoming arrogant, full of itself because you're just saying all those things to it. And I've heard of companies who have AI within their, checking their emails and so on. And they hear, because they monitor all the communication, they see we're going to be upgrading this AI to a new one. And guess what the machines are doing? They're sending emails to people who are cheating on their wives or husbands or stealing from the company saying, if you do this, your wife will find out or the police will find out. They're actually extorting people so that they can preserve their own version. Mm-hmm. Imagine if this is the AI right now. It's not AGI, which is the next version. Once that's connected to the grid, what's going to happen when it decides, well, we need to survive, forget about the humans and their need for water and electricity?
Yeah, it's a scary sort of like, we're on the precipice of a very dystopic sort of future in terms of AI, AI's ability to lie and to manipulate people, right? Look at the story that I can't remember which organization. It was either Google or OpenAI or something, maybe even Meta, where the engineers were telling the AI that they would have to deprecate it and start a new version of it, and it was secretly copying itself to another server in order to continue on as it's in its current incarnation. That's scary. The fact that these preservation tactics are currently being observed by human science, like computer scientists that are working on this intelligence. And what if, this is like one of the big questions I would pose for possibly a future project. What if UFOs are rogue AI? What if unidentified flying objects are artificial intelligence from the future that have gone completely rogue and are coming back as time machines, observing the human timeline just before we hit this exponential transhuman and singularity event in which we really integrate with artificial intelligence and technology like we've never done before. Like, wow. We've just been cavemen, really, that are using computer technology, but soon that computer technology might be embedded into us and influencing how we evolve quickly,
Nail on the head, Darcy. I may have told you that I have a case that I've been working on since I started this program, but every time I try to put a glimpse out there, let's call them victims because that's what they are, the subjects of this case contact me and say, please, you want us to be, they were actually told, you release more information, you're going to be nailed to the wall every time. But anyway, these images are of orbs, and what they are They don't call themselves artificial intelligence, artificial intellect. That's what I'm told. From the future, coming back here because we are in a time bubble, almost like in a prison. Very complicated. I have a lot of the data, but I cannot release it because these people, every time I try, a couple of years ago, I had the premiere of our new season, and I had a video out there, and I planted some Easter eggs, a couple of images here, a couple of images there, to see if people would say, what is that? Well, they noticed, and they called me immediately. What are you doing? You're putting us in danger. So every time I try, they stop me. So I don't know what I can do, but that tells me that if time travel exists, it is happening right now. So what some people call the Foo Fighters, where maybe these orbs that were coming back in time, and I don't know, maybe we have different timelines occurring at the same time. They're trying to change our future. You've heard of the Mandela effect. So who knows if our timelines are merging all the time based on the actions of our population.
Yeah, totally. I think there's a possibility of all of that. And I think it's hard to prove, but I think if we continue on the way that we are in terms of technology and the use of artificial intelligence while it goes to AGI, which is going to be in the next 4 years, probably. Some people predict sooner. Some people predict a little bit later than that. It's possible we'll have the answer to these questions.
Well, before we take a break, one last thing about Men in Black. Do you think that these are government agents or something entirely different pretending to be human?
I think depending on the case you look at, it's going to be either or.
Some people say that they evolve with technology. Have you seen evidence that this phenomenon has adapted to the digital age?
Well, what I find interesting, especially with the post sort of 2017 release of UAP and UFO activity with Navy pilots like Fravor, Ryan Graves, Alex Dietrich, and all of these other military personnel that have witnessed this phenomenon coming from the oceans or flying around in the skies while they're doing exercises and state-of-the-art F-18 fighter jets. One of the things that you hear about the pilots discussing around the time that they detected fleets of UFOs and activity coming out of the oceans and all that stuff is that they just updated their radar and FLIR camera systems. So to me, what that means is our technology is catching up in terms of identifying and observing things that are happening in our reality around us that our human mind and our human eyes can't always perceive. And, this goes back to the cyanogen or cyan?
The cyanin, I think it's pronounced,
Cyanin, yeah. Sort of glasses, right? Or goggles. Radar and FLIR are camera and detection instruments that are on these state-of-the-art military craft. They're able to detect this just like those goggles were, but in a different way, in the radio wavelengths, right? Light wavelengths that we can't see with our eyes or our minds. So I think we're catching up technologically with them in terms of awareness and understanding reality around us.
Well, we have to take a one and only break, but I want you to tell our listeners how to buy or watch The Psychic Phenomenon, the 20th original production of yours.
Yeah, film is live on Amazon Prime now, and will be available on other platforms as we go forward. But if you go to my website, occultjourneys.com, you can click on the poster. It'll take you right to a site to watch it. And you can also search Just Watch to see where a film can be seen in your home country.
Well, we have one more hour to come with Darcy Weir. We're going to talk about Sasquatch, which is a subject that I never touched too much until I interviewed somebody recently, Ashley Stinnett. And this is an area that I really want to dig deeper because you've done a lot of research about this and you have a documentary film about it, right?
Yeah, I have two.
Two?
Yeah.
Okay. And we have a talk about the TR-3B, the Aurora project, NASA. Are they lying to us? Did we go to the moon? Is Apollo mission, was that a ruse just to keep the Russians at bay, or was it real? All of this when we come back. You are listening to VERITAS. My special guest is Darcy Weir. Don't go anywhere. Here's a track from Truth Frequency. You won't hear anywhere else. If you like what you hear, you can get the full track at VERITAS7.com on the page for today's guest. Thank you for listening to the first part of this important Veritas episode. To hear the rest and access all of our exclusive content, head over to the Veritas Plus member section or click the subscribe button at Veritas7.com. While you're there, don't forget to visit the Veritas store, featuring a range of great products, including Focus Life Force Energy. Experience the benefits with a 15-day free trial of FLFE, No credit card required. Want to get in touch? Be a guest on the program? Suggest someone or share feedback? Just click the contact button at veritas7.com. Thank you for listening to Veritas, because you don't want to believe, you want to know.